Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm the NX Unite lead here at Nexus Marketing, and will be your moderator for today's panel session. Our topic today is smooth sailing association operations best practices. And as usual, I'm really excited to jump into the conversation, but I do have a few quick logistics to cover. NX Unite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing and serves as a powerful community resource designed to foster connections and facilitate lasting relationships within the mission-driven sector. On NX Unite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, and cause-driven podcasts. NX Unite also hosts webinars, demos, and of course, panels with experts such as the lovely folks here with me today. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. So at any time during the panel session, please feel free to start submitting your questions via the questions tab, and we'll address as many as we possibly can in the second half of the session. If you came into the session with a topic in mind, something you want answered, I really suggest getting it in sooner rather than later. That'll give me a better idea of how many questions we need to get through in that second half. So again, start submitting them in the questions tab, or you can also do it directly in the chat. All right, if at any point you're having any technical difficulties or have any logistics questions, my team member Anton will be in the chat under the Team NX Unite username, ready to assist. So let us know what's happening, give a little holler in the chat, and we'll figure out how to get you back on and enjoying the session as quickly as possible. I did also want to share that this panel session is being recorded. So if you get to the end and the insight you heard is just so fantastic, you need to hear it a second time. Good news is it's going to automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the session. Give it a few minutes after we wrap up and you'll have access to that recording. It will also continue to be accessible on the NX Unite website in the on-demand panel section. So if you have any friends in the industry who you're like, can't believe they missed it, they needed to be there, that session was perfect for them, please feel free to share that same registration page with them and they'll be able to access the recording. All right, very quickly before I introduce today's panelists, I do want to give a big thank you to our audience, whether you're joining us live and letting us know in the chat where you're calling in from or you're watching the recording. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with us and be part of the NX Unite community. And if you are joining us live, I hope you will submit those questions so we can address the topics relevant to you and your team. To begin with the introductions, I'd first like to introduce Thomas McClintock, who is a Senior Client Services Manager at Empowered Margins Incorporated, where he uses his 30 years of MarTech, communication, and business development expertise to take digital marketing and automation to new heights. Tom founded and ran several firms, including 3 marketing agencies, a venture-backed content aggregator, and an international trading house. Tom knows how to use the right data to find the right audience at the right time. He particularly enjoys crafting targeted messages for fast-growth tech companies like Empowered Margins because of their vision and ability to elevate and transform whole industries. When not marketing, you can often find Tom with his wife and son in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where they divide their off hours between movies, sci-fi, games, the outdoors, and volunteer work for at-risk youth. So glad to have you on this session today, Thomas.
Thanks very much, Colleen, and hello, everyone.
Also joining us today is Neeraj Garg, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Aplusify. For 20 years, he has worked alongside a multi-talented team to help associations and nonprofits drive digital transformation within their organization, enabling them to be more innovative, agile, and donor and member-centric. As Aplusify's COO, he leads an internal task force that shares lessons learned, best practices, and practical applications that specifically relate to associations and nonprofits. So glad to have you on this session, Neeraj.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And I think I would say hi to everyone for joining this session. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Also joining us today is Brian Lacey, who is a data consultant at NPO Info and the principal of Brian Lacey and Associates, a fundraising and data services firm with more than 30 years of experience that provides leading industry resources and veteran talent to maximize opportunities across the giving spectrum. With expertise in the North American market and connections across the philanthropic landscape, he and his team have worked from higher education to healthcare to religious and community charities and have secured fundraising programs and have created fundraising programs regardless of the size of team or budget. From annual giving solutions to major and principal giving strategies, they have helped more than 400 nonprofits raise more than $1 billion in philanthropic support. Glad to have you on another session, Brian.
Thanks, Colleen. Good to meet everybody today.
Finally, joining us today is Torben Grosser, who is Vice President of Product Marketing at Event Mobi. Torben is a seasoned event planner and marketer with more than a decade of experience. He joined Event Mobi in 2012 and heads up the company's European office. As general manager, Torben built a multidisciplinary team of passionate marketers, sales, and support staff and grew Event Mobi into one of Europe's leading event technology brands. Passionate about education, he champions Event Mobi's product marketing efforts and lectures at Victoria University of Applied Sciences and SRH University in Berlin. Glad to have you, Torben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, it is finally time to jump in and get started and have me stop talking for a little bit. So Thomas, I'm going to have you start us off with our very first question. How are association operations best practices different today than they were a few years ago? And what lessons do we need to take from the last few years?
Well, it's interesting how you define a few years. You know, you go back a little bit longer, and associations were all about, let's get a group of members together once a year. We'll pass out business cards. We'll all read the same industry magazine, and we'll get like insurance coverage together. And that was pretty much your association. And now it's very data driven. And even just in the last few months, it has changed. It's not your grandfather's cloud anymore. There are lots of opportunities for new APIs to connect a new system to a new system. Everything can be connected together. And so I think when you're starting with a data-driven organization, you have to begin by saying, how are we collecting our data? How are we warehousing our data? How are we analyzing our data? How are we visualizing our data? And if you can do that by, thinking about what the velocity of the data is, what the value of the data is, and what the volume of the data is, you can really architect your operations around those key questions, and you can serve your members better because they're not just going to gather once a year in a hotel room. They need, benchmarking. They need to be able to compare how their organization is doing, in the context of their local economy, their regional economy, their national economy, and the world economy. And being able to do that with data, it really makes all of the difference.
Thank you so much for starting us off, Thomas. And I will admit I was a little vague with what a few years is. I've decided to let you all decide what you want to consider a few years. All right, Neeraj, over to you. Thoughts on how best practices are different today than whatever our vague few years ago, and what lessons do we need to take?
Yeah, I think I will not go back beyond 5 years. So I will give you a very practical example of how the things have changed in associations. Because I remember back in 2018 and 19, when we used to talk to our association clients, we used to suggest them that data is very important for your org, right? Because everything, like Thomas said, has to be data driven. And then we paid a lot of attention to they should not have silo systems and integrate. And since customers have more digital presence, we should actually be collecting data. We should be having online systems. We should have online learning management systems. And everyone at the associations used to like these proposals because they were insightful. But there was no sense of urgency in implementing them, okay? Because there were various reasons that were given in terms of they don't have that kind of organization structure to manage those kind of things. They don't have that budget to invest in that kind of process improvements or innovation. The senior leadership does not get involved into it. And I think we move forward to 2020 when a pandemic was there and everything changed, right? So everything that we were suggesting to them in terms of having more digital presence, having more data-driven things, having maybe virtual platforms to drive online learning, that all came up. And they were not prepared, right? So it actually provided them less time to prepare for what was expected out of them. And now I think if we talk to them in these things, what I have found is they have adapted to innovation, right? At least they're open to adaptation in terms of innovating their systems, in terms of membership engagement dashboards, because a lot of, I think 70% of our customers' main priority in the next 2 years to maybe have something which caters to membership engagement dashboards, uh, member engagement reports, and they're open to those things, right? So I think that is the kind of difference I could see in terms of technology embracement, or maybe data-driven approach, or trying to understand their members better. So I think that is the change that I could see within these few years that associations have adapted to.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. Brian, over to you. Thoughts on how best practices are different today?
Yeah, well, obviously Thomas and Neeraj have touched on many of the elements. I'll just sort of add a couple more thoughts about some of the elements that they talked about. So certainly COVID, changed the go into the one conference a year that Thomas mentioned at the beginning into the vast majority of things being delivered online. And the majority of your members expecting opportunity for continuous learning, and they expect adaptation now from organizations. So, that's been something that lots and lots of associations have had to get up to speed on very, very quickly. It also prompted COVID, as Neeraj pointed out, it created a need for diversification of revenue streams because, conferences disappeared, in the nonprofit space, galas disappeared and then they came back, but they were online. Those who managed to make something online had a leg up on everyone else, and the folks who decided to sort of sit back and wait for the pandemic to end, some of those associations are, I'm not going to say they're irreparably damaged, but some of them, it looks like they may never be the size they were, because when people returned to the internet, they discovered I can get a lot of this information from other sources. So that's the last thing I'll say, is that I think that all associations are trying to and have to continue to use data, et cetera, but they're trying to develop stronger engagement programs for their members. Because if they don't, their members are going to get the same information, Chat GPT and other sources. They're going to go get the information they need outside the association. So the association has to be focused on really adding some kind of engagement value that's perceived as being worth the dues or what have you. But yeah, those are the primary changes I've seen. And again, I look back, and as I say, we look back the last few years, I simply think that COVID is the biggest thing in our last 3-year window. And so it's driven everything online.
Thank you so much, Brian. All right, Torben, I think you know what question's coming your way. How are best practices different today?
I think one of the biggest changes that came in with the pandemic is that, and talking about it now seems kind of odd, but really all of the data is available online in some kind of form or shape for association. So what I mean by that is we're working with event planners mostly, and a lot of the data was still somewhere in static Excel sheets that were somewhere on a computer, which you couldn't programmatically access. Sometimes you would even see associations that would not have membership management system, AMS systems running, and they just did that on a computer in an office, and that was fine. And with everybody remote, that barrier has finally fallen. So from an operational perspective, all that data is now available to be accessed. As some of the fine gentlemen here said, associations also have become better at using that data and kind of analyzing it. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I just want to add that this is mostly true, at least in my research, for larger associations. So associations that have 5 or 10 staff, at least full time. But this is still very much not the case for very small associations unless they have a very, very powerful or very creative people working the association who do that. But for smaller associations, that, from an operational perspective, I still find that a lot of the pre-pandemic patterns are still visible. So they are right now trying to figure out, how can I take my smaller association and do all the things that it couldn't do before because my data wasn't online, and now it is. But they're still very much in the process of figuring that out. And then the other thing that has happened, I think, and that's also what the fine gentleman said before me, we see a shift finally towards engagement and community. And I mean, us as suppliers, we've been preaching this for the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years. And everybody said, yeah, we're going to get into it. And then everybody had to get into it within 2 weeks. And that was quite impressive. But still, how we can make these engagements last sustainably, that is something that a lot of associations are still trying to figure out.
Thank you so much, Torben. We have had a poll go live where we asked you all, have your association's operations undergone changes over the last few years? I know some of you have already found that, but please feel free to keep voting. I see right now 88% of you said yes, significant changes over the past few years, and 13% said yes, minor adjustments so far. Now we have one person that says no, they remain largely the same, so my percentages aren't going to add up anymore, but that's all right. But nice to see that we are kind of across the range, some people with significant changes, some largely the same. So thank you all for filling that out. Brian, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. How do you see the relationship between technology adoption and operational efficiency within associations? And what steps can organizations take to strike the right balance?
Thanks, Colleen. I do think it's interesting. You know, I think when we talk about striking the right balance, that conjured up in me is that we need to remain, to the best degree that we can, we need to preserve the personal touch, right? We always think about technology and we're always putting in things that allow us to sort of execute things more rapidly and so forth. But if we don't, if our associations don't have an ability for a personal touch as well, we lose some of the value of the technology, right? We become just, you know, another Google, you know, a better Google, or a Google focused on what these people do for a living. But, you know, so I would say that relationship, while we're focusing on efficiency, so we're looking for automation, we're looking for tools, we're looking for simplification, we have to continue to strive that balance for user friendliness and still have the ability to let people connect. So one of the features that I think about that's become pervasive everywhere, it wasn't everywhere 10 years ago, it's everywhere now, is when you go on and you have that chat feature where you can, you know, you get on, you click a button in the lower corner, you want to chat with somebody, 15 seconds later, somebody's there. It's not a phone conversation. It's less expensive for the companies or the associations to offer that. They don't have to leave somebody answering the phone just sitting there doing nothing. The person can be working and get a prompt while they're working, but can then, if they have a moment, you know, 3 or 4 people can get the same prompt. One of them can take the prompt when they have a moment that's not totally upsetting to their work pattern and go and give a personal feedback and response to somebody who got to the website and didn't feel that what they saw there was enough for them. You know, I think that's a value, right? I think that's a real value. I don't have that ability in my company to offer that, but that's something I want to add, right? Because I think that lets people feel like, okay, I can still kind of reach a human being, because there's nothing more frustrating. I can think about lots and lots of software and lots of things I've used, or apps and things I've used, where I abandoned them rather quickly because I got one frustration, couldn't figure it out. There was no other human being to talk to about it. So I just deleted it and I moved on. So I guess that's the one thing I'd say, is that maintaining some way to allow preserving that personal connection, I think is going to be the thing we have to be careful of when we run out there and simply try to automate everything.
Thank you so much, Brian. All right, Torben, over to you. Thoughts on the relationship between technology adoption and operational efficiency for our associations?
I honestly think the relationship right now, and actually over the past, I don't know, past 10 years, has been slightly too ambitious sometimes. So we see a lot of technology being thrown at problems when sometimes that doesn't necessarily make sense. And I think one of the biggest challenges here that I don't see a lot of talk in the association space about is a concept that in the IT space we've known now for decades, which is called the user experience. And the reason why user experience is becoming important is, and some of this was mentioned during the first round of questions, is there's a lot more competition. And so, yes, quality to a certain extent is a choice that I can take. So I can go to the association or the source or the social network that offers the better quality. But because we're humans and we're kind of lazy, we will also choose whatever is the easiest and best to use. And so if I have, an association website that requires me to hold 5 different passwords and to run interconnected from one page to another, that can cause a seriously poor user experience. The same if I'm part of a discussion group and I get a push notification every 2 minutes that there is something new going on. And this is something that association professionals right now, they love all that technology. And there's many reasons to love the technology. I mean, it's amazing what can be done. But kind of learning more about user experience, and a lot of it, again, can be learned through the same ways your members can learn things about your subject matter. You can just listen to people on YouTube, listen to podcasts and so on, but put yourself into the shoes, not of somebody who wants to distribute your association's content and further your association's mission, but try to put yourself into the shoes of somebody who's on the receiving end and see it through their lens. And that's something that I think can be done to strike that balance really well.
Thank you so much, Torben. Thomas, over to you. Thoughts on the relationship between technology adoption and operational efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what my fellow panelists have said that, you can be too ambitious and you can get the cart before the horse. I think a key aspect is, does the technology adoption support the organization's mission? Not does it save money? Brian was touching on, the tremendous number of organizations today that seem to have, lost their telephone. And there's no way to get in touch with them. And sure, we all want to save time, we all want to be efficient, but I can't tell you a more frustrating experience than when you feel like you've lost that connection with the brand, because they're falling all over themselves to save money, and they're doing it at the customer experience expense. So I believe that you have to first ask, how does this technology fit into the mission of the organization? And then you have to go through the steps of how do you implement it such that that mission stays at the forefront. Because really, in this day and age, organizations have an obligation to be reached by their constituent groups, however those constituent groups want to reach them. If you have constituent groups that like, carrier pigeons, then get a bunch of pigeons and figure out how to use that. But it's got to be outwardly focused. It can't be all about, what's the cheapest way for us to check this box, because that no longer works.
Thank you so much, Thomas. All right, Neeraj, anything you want to add in terms of the relationship between tech adoption and operational efficiency?
I think most of the things have been covered. But yes, I agree. When you are actually innovating some technology within your association, right? It has to come from the business side, not from the technology team. Okay, so I you can see like there is a buzzword called marketing automation, which is very popular in associations right now, right? That we should implement marketing automation because we have to increase member engagement. We have to do a personalized connect with the members. But I think what we fail to understand is we can only automate things for which the process has been set up, right? Because automation generally helps to speed up the process. It does not create a process itself, right? And when we try to as a technology team try to cater into this technology innovation, most of the times what we find out is that the process is not set up right. They don't have a marketing team in place. They are not aware of what process has to be automated. They have heard from other associations that we have to do marketing automation because because the other association has done it, but they don't realize that since their business does not know what to automate, how can we automate it? So I think technology helps the business in driving more efficiencies, but I think it has to be a collaborative effort between the business team and the technology team to take it forward. Neither the business team alone can take it forward, neither the technology team can alone can take it forward. So it's important to understand why we need that technology innovation, like everyone said, before implementing it, because otherwise we would be just wasting in dollars and dollars implementing something which we don't know why to implement. So I think it should come from the business side rather than the technology side.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. Torben, I'm going to have you answer our next question, but actually I'm getting ahead of myself. Quickly, I want to remind our audience that if you have any questions, please submit those now. Now is the perfect window to get them in to leave us time to address as many as we can. So if you have a topic that we have not covered that you would like our group of panelists to discuss, please send it in the questions tab or the chat. Otherwise, I will be selfish and ask all of my own questions, which will be great for me, but might not answer the topic that you were hoping we would address. All right, Torben, over to you. Can you discuss the role of data-driven decision-making in association operations? How can associations harness data to drive impactful changes and improvements?
Partially, so I'm going to keep myself short because I think other people here have more to say about this than I. We mostly work with associations between 1 to 10 staff, which also are honestly the biggest majority of the market. And those associations, because everything is now so easy to track, they sit on a trove of data. I mean, Neeraj mentioned that just now. Marketing automation is all over the place, and there's so much data that gets collected. The same with web analytics and everything. And quite frankly, we do not see a lot of good data-driven decision taking with these associations. In particular, because also doing data-driven decision management is actually pretty hard, because I can look at any piece of data and I can literally take any conclusion from it. Because if I want the data to show this, I just look at the data set through my lens, through my bias, and I will get that out of there. So being able to actually analyze data and to take a step back, get rid of your biases and so on, is a pretty specialized skill that we don't see in a lot of associations. And I think, which is also why some of the suppliers in that space are really seeing their moment there, because it is so important to do this. But yeah, I just want to say, if associations want to harness their data, they need to make sure to organize it and be honest and try to understand it.
Thank you so much. Brian, over to you. The role of data-driven decision-making in association operations and how we can really harness data to drive impactful changes.
Yeah, and I think Torben is certainly, and the panel, we've touched on this in the previous questions as well. It's important, but we haven't really said this. It's important, and I guess what Neeraj was getting into it when he talked about combining the tech teams and the business teams. Before you start collecting data, or before you start even analyzing and collecting data, and we can talk, and I will speak to that in just a minute, you have to know what impact you're hoping to make, and you have to properly define what the impact is, okay? And then, where possible, what are the key metrics that we're gonna use to measure our impact, right? There's a lot of people that are reporting on data, quantifying data, collecting data, simply because it's the data that they can get easiest, right? And they're simply building all of these dashboards and things that count members and the age of members, and they do all of these things, but, well, wait a second. I understand why you're counting things, and I understand why you're generating dashboards and reports that speak to the data that you can capture most readily, because your members might submit it on membership forms, and you can pull it out of donation data when you look at their donation data. But if we're talking about impact, you have to fully understand the impact to then say, okay, what are the metrics that are going to judge us based on our ability with respect to impact? And then you might discover that, okay, now we don't have any of the data we need to comment on our actual impact. Like, does this association result in, let's say, and again, I'll be very simple. Let's say it's an engineering group and there's a bachelor's degree in engineering, and let's say that there's a reason why you want a certification, a certain certification, and it demonstrates some real success. If the association's existence leads to more people getting that certification, then, and that's what the purpose, or that's one of the missions of the association, then yeah, measure that, and measure that and collect the data points necessary to measure that. So I think that, I think Neeraj was onto something when he brought in the fact that this is both the business team and the tech team. I think a lot of times I've just seen so many platforms in the nonprofit space that are counting things and producing graphs because we like them, and perhaps because even our VPs and our leadership like the visual data presented. But if it isn't speaking to what we're supposed to be doing, how many people, if you're a food bank, how many hungry families are you feeding? Not how many tons of food did you move? I do know that. I mean, I like our Houston Food Bank is one of the largest in the nation. I've done work with them. But in all of their annual reports, they keep talking about the tons of food distributed. And I'm like, tell me how many of my neighbors you're feeding. Because I don't want to know how many tons of food is. I don't understand what that is, and so I think that that's something we should spend more time on. What are we trying to do? What are the metrics that would best measure that? And then, how do we collect that data? So I'll stop and let everyone else have some time.
Thank you, Brian. Neeraj, over to you. What do you see as the role of data-driven decision-making in association operations?
Yeah, I think everything is related, right? And I think Brian made a very good point that, and we see it every time, that business does not know, like, why are they collecting that metrics? They just want to collect that metrics because they see these beautiful dashboards, right, which they can actually present it to the management. But I don't think so any data-driven decision is taken by them. So it's important to understand. And I think before even going to that data-driven approach, we need to actually understand, like, what is the size of our association? Like Thoban said, for small associations, we even don't need that data-driven approach because they don't have that kind of data where we need to churn that data and define that approach. I think it's only applicable to associations where there are like thousands or 10,000s or lakhs of members, millions of members who are actually there. And we have to segment that data based on demographics, depending on their personal taste. But I think if you're a small association, why do you need to determine the data-driven approach? And obviously, most of the associations don't have that skill set to take that decisions on that data that is there in front of them, right? It can be biased, obviously, unless you have a separate team who is analyzing it and taking decisions on it. I don't think so it's useful, right? It's just a matter of showing that your association is quite advanced on technologies, and but you are not doing anything with it. And even before going to that data-driven approach, most of the cases we have seen is people don't understand the data behind the organization that is stored in their systems. A lot of the data that is there within the systems is bad data, or we can call data swamps, right? So, and if you are doing a data-driven approach on a data which is not cleaned, which is not accurate, which is inconsistent, you cannot take data-driven decisions on it. Okay. So I think if you want to do that approach, I would suggest that, as I suggested before as well, the business team should come up on why they need that approach, what metrics they want, right? And why do they don't want that metrics, and how is actually it's going to help them engage members better, or maybe how are they going to project the revenues go up, or how are they going to provide that personalized trust to the members by that data-driven approach. Unless you are clear on that, there is no point in doing that data-driven approach because others are doing it.
Thank you, Neeraj. All right, Thomas, we seem to have you back. Can you discuss the role of data-driven decision-making in association operations?
Yeah, thank you. Data-driven decision-making is really where the rubber meets the road. So basically, we're talking about business intelligence. Um, are you getting the data that you need? Are you able to access it? Is it being reported properly? A big part of this is data visualization. And this is an interesting phenomenon, but more and more, our data reporting tools have become so sophisticated that we no longer really understand how to use them. And so we can make a flashy looking chart and kind of call it a day, and without stopping to ask ourselves, what is the meaning that we're trying to convey? Are we, who is our audience? What are they expecting to see? Is the data different from what they're expecting to see? And are we conveying it in such a way that we're not taking up too much time and we're getting our point across quickly? That's all the science and the art of data visualization. And I've seen so many um, bad attempts at visualizing data. You have a pie chart with 2,000 different colors, or you've got, you don't take into account, the change from last year, or something like that. There are lots of poor abilities to do that. So what I would say in terms of making good data driven decisions is make sure that you're reporting your data accurately and effectively, and that you're thinking about what is the point of every chart, every visual, every graphic that you are going to show to anybody, making sure that what the audience sees is what you truly need to convey.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Torben, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. If we are looking ahead, what shifts in association operational practices do you anticipate in response to changing member expectations and technological advancements? How can associations stay proactive in embracing these changes?
Honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges that associations are going to have is making this human connection stay alive and stay heavily alive in between, the art event, the art conference that an association runs. I'm suspecting and I'm fearing that when it comes to delivering knowledge, education, and content, that quite a lot of different organizations online, from YouTubers and bloggers and everybody, some of these people are going to eat away some of the association's lunch in there. So the question is, what remains for associations? And I think the really powerful bit that associations have been sitting on for forever, essentially, are the people who rally and gather behind them. And so kind of letting go of this idea that we need to publish a research report every month or a white paper every other month, and then once a year we have a big conference, and moving into a world where we say, well, actually, the human capital that we have as associations, that is our real capital. I think that's one of the most challenging shifts, because honestly, right now, a lot of associations still haven't figured out this aspect of how do I keep my online community alive. And there's a lot of great examples of associations or individuals who run online communities. And I think associations in general need to take pages out of that playbook and make sure that they move from this delivery place of information or conferences that happens every once in a while to something that happens all year round, and where people really become emotionally attached to that association.
Thank you so much, Torben. Neeraj, over to you. When we're looking ahead, what shifts in association operational practices do you anticipate, and how can we stay proactive?
I think when we talk about associations, doing a major change is always a problem, because you don't realize that what impact it will have on the members of the association, or how will it drive your change. So I would suggest maybe not just focusing on technology innovation. I think we should focus more on process improvements as well. Like, I will give you an example. One of our association clients was using a donation app, which is available in the app exchange, and they were actually paying $100 per month for using that donation app and generating donations out of it. Now, since it was a separate link, and no, maybe the donors were not contributing so much, right? Because it was not integrated with their actual AMS system. So things were not working out. I think what we did was we actually talked to them, and we suggested them that if we just get rid of that donation app and we build a page, customized page within the renewal membership page, right? So that whenever a member is coming for renewal, right, he also sees a donation page, which actually lists down all the donations that you can give to different foundations, right? That will actually help them seeing that donation page, and it will help them visualize it instead of running a separate donation app, which no one is clicking. And we did that. So, and the donations increased by 20% to 30%, right? And we got rid of the old donation app as well. So we saved money on an external app, and then we customized the existing product to increase the donations. So every time, it's not about introducing a new technology into your system. Sometimes it's about to apply your minds and do what I'm doing wrong, right? And how small change within the existing technology without embracing a new one can actually help. And again, I say it can only be possible if the two teams or all the teams work together to find a solution to it, right? If you just leave the solution on the technology team to find a solution, they will come up with n number of technologies to get embedded in your system, right? And you will waste money and you will not get the results out. So unless the business gets involved and take that business driven decision on why do they want to spend that money and what else can be done, and brainstorm that idea of multiple things, not just one solution, I think then only associations can progress, and that is the best way out, right? So it boils down to the same thing: a collaborative effort between all the teams, a collaborative effort between the business team and the technology team, and the business processes combined with the technology can actually yield great results.
Thank you, Neeraj. Thomas, over to you. How can we prepare for changing member expectations and technological advancements? And how can associations just in general stay ahead?
Well, I mean, there are a number of different ways, but I'll throw out one example, which is I've seen this work increasingly well in a whole variety of different associations across different verticals, and that is benchmarking. We are now at the point where everyone is aware of the problem of too much information. So we need to have just the right information. And, it used to be that a clever association would do a survey of its vertical and find out, maybe they'd pass around an Excel spreadsheet and they'd expect everyone to fill that in. And it worked for a time. But after, consolidation and transparency and all of the new factors that are involved in data today, um, those members don't necessarily want to participate in that Excel spreadsheet because everyone knows who everyone is, and you're not really prepared to reveal um, data that you feel you should protect. But there are new technologies beyond Excel that allow you to track that. Like, for example, Power BI. You can do that same survey, but you can do it on a quid pro quo basis. You can say, if you just want to give me a little bit of information, I'm going to trade that for a little bit of information from the back end. And you can control that much better so that you can you can you can meet your members where they're at, and you can work with them no matter how much level of detail they are willing or unwilling to provide into this group benchmarking effort. And that's a great example of using a smarter technology to accomplish something that really needs to be done with better clarity and with more thoroughness now more than ever.
Thank you, Thomas. All right, Brian, any final thoughts on how we anticipate changing member expectations and technological advancements?
Yeah, I think we can assume that we're going to see the continued digital transformation is going to continue to happen. We're already there. We're in a hybrid model where we have live events and we have a lot of things online as well. And as that continues, and as we begin to see things like AI and automation incorporated more and more, we just have to be aware of the fact that members still desire a personalized member experience. So I think the degree to which we can be thinking about that, little things where we're collecting, there's no reason why today in 2023 that I'm receiving a catalog of offerings, whether I'm receiving it in a physical publication or in an email, that aren't appropriate to me, and yet it still happens. So simple use of data can make that not an issue. So I think we have to continue to, at a minimum, be doing those things, looking at our members, looking at them. And I think we still want community, right? So to the degree that the association becomes a means of, okay, I'll go back to my engineering example. Yeah, I get it. There's one conference a year and it moves around the nation or what have you. But as an association, can you help me or allow me to submit my information? Can I submit my information and say, hey, you know what, I'm in Houston and I'd like to talk to other engineers in the oil industry. And can you facilitate that? Again, the association has to surrender a little bit of control, but you either surrender the control or you cease to exist, right? I mean, and I think about some of the early technologies, the early social medias. If you're not helping me connect with other people, eventually I'll cut you out and I'll move forward. So I think that they have to be thoughtful in how they can provide value to members, whether it be connection locally, outside of conferences and things like that. And then, but to what Thomas and Torben and Neeraj have said, we're also going to see one of the things that's come late to the United States, I think, relative to other countries. I'm originally from Canada, so I'm a dual. Torben's in Germany, and he can certainly tell you about this. We do not respect data the way the rest of the world respects data. I can sell you, I can look the three of you gentlemen up and I know what you paid for your house. I know what you still owe on your mortgage. I know all kinds of things. And that's just because we're in the United States and that's just what's available publicly. That's going to change too, right? I don't know about all of you, but I've had my identity stolen twice and it's exhausting. And I don't ever want it to happen again, you know? So I think that, again, I want associations to help connect people, but again, it's all in the framework of getting better and better and better with our security, right? I mean, when you look at the big companies that have been damaged by the fact that they couldn't protect their customers' credit card data, that's a challenge. That's going to be a challenge going forward. So I think you just have to looking out there, seeing the milestones, knowing what the expectation is, and then doing your best to, you know, add value, personalize experience, and just simply keep going. But it's going to require constant adaptation. So I hope that all of our associations are thinking about not, hey, getting ourselves to a point in time and imagining that we're ever done adapting. Because if they think that way, I think that's not an expectation that their members would accept.
Thank you so much, Brian. All right, I have to have us start wrapping up very quickly. I want to let our audience know that we are about to drop a survey in the chat. This is a survey asking you if there's any particular panelists that you have lingering questions for. I recognize that maybe you have a question that's really pertinent to just your organization and you want to make sure it gets answered, and I want to make sure that as well. So fill out that survey. Let us know who we need to put you in touch with so you can get your questions answered if we weren't able to address them today. All right, I have one final question I'm going to try to sneak in as a final question for our panelists. We're going to have to make this one short and sweet so that we can end on time. Neeraj, I'm going to have you start us off. If an association was only going to make one small change to their operational practices right now, where would you suggest they start?
I think they should start with understanding their current process and where they can actually do some tweaks in their process improvements and how technology can help them improve that process or innovate that process. So I would suggest that change for all the associations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neeraj. Thomas, over to you. If we could make one small change right now, where should we begin?
I would just track who owns what data in your organization. Sometimes it's as easy as just sketching out something on a quick spreadsheet. Find out who runs, who controls the various data sources internally, and then as a bonus, add to that what external data sources you would also like to have, which you could perhaps monetize or combine into new products for your members. That's a quick change that can do a lot of good.
Thank you so much, Thomas. All right, Brian, what one small change should we be considering?
Yeah, I think I'd say continue to produce content, meaningful content, where possible, tailored to the members and where they're at, and then delivered personally. More content is better.
Thank you, Brian. All right, Torben, final thoughts on what one small change we should consider today.
I want to extend on what Neeraj said about learning about the process. I want to add one step to it and learn about your members. And there's an easy way to do it. It's sometimes a bit annoying, but it's literally take your membership list, call one member a week, ask them, how did they learn about your association? Why are they even a member? What do they like? What do they not like? What do they think could be better? Where do they struggle with your association? And really just make it a weekly thing to talk to one or two members and share the results internally.
Thank you so much, Torben. All right, you all get gold stars for a really quick, speedy final question. Thank you all. With that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists. I know if we were in person, there would be a round of applause. So just know I'm sharing that emotionally through the screen with you all today. Do also want to give a big thank you to our audience. Thank you to those of you who joined live. Really wonderful to have you here today. And if you're watching the recording, thank you for your time as well. Hope you all will attend some future NX Unite panels. We have a packed end of summer, early fall of panel sessions, both specifically related to the association space and a little bit more broad, but may still be relevant to your team. So keep your eye out on the NX Unite website and the NX Unite LinkedIn for any that might be relevant to you and your work. All right, with that, I will wrap it up. Again, a huge thank you to our panelists, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.